My name is Emily Parker. I'm 31 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the man who turned my pain into a punchline. I'll never forget the night it happened. I was sitting in a packed theater, the kind of place that buzzes with energy, before the lights dim, watching my ex, Jason, perform his stand-up comedy special. The crowd adored him. Every line, every smirk, every perfectly timed pause had them roaring with laughter. For the first few minutes, I sat there in the dark, a knot in my stomach, trying to convince myself that I was strong enough to hear whatever he might say. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment he turned my life, my private, messy, painful truth, into his material. That first, it was subtle. He started telling a story about dating a woman with issues, and the audience chuckled. I told myself it was coincidence, that he couldn't possibly mean me. But then he went further. He described panic attacks, not in vague terms, but in detail, word for word, the way I had once confided in him during the lowest point of my life. He mocked the way I cried on the bathroom floor, the way I struggled to breathe, the way I begged him to just sit with me until it passed. He exaggerated my pain, twisting it into a joke, and the audience laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands trembling as the laughter swelled around me. I sat frozen in my seat, my face burning as I listened to my story, my secret shame, being turned into entertainment. It was like he had ripped the most vulnerable pages out of my diary and read them aloud for the world to laugh at. I whispered under my breath, barely able to hear myself over the laughter. That was my story, my pain, and he sold it for laughs. I had never felt so exposed, so humiliated, so betrayed. But as the laughter echoed through the theater, something inside me hardened. I realized in that moment that Jason hadn't just stolen my story. He had tried to take my voice, and I wasn't about to let him. That night, as the curtain fell and the audience stood to cheer for him, I sat in silence and made myself a promise. I swore I'd make sure the world knew the real story. And I wasn't just going to take my pain back. I was going to own it. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business, and dreams were usually limited to getting out. My father left when I was 6, and from then on, it was just me and my mom. She worked long hours at a retail store, sometimes juggling 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. We didn't have much, but she always tried to make sure I had enough to eat, enough to wear, enough to feel like I belonged, even when the world seemed determined to remind me I didn't. I learned early how to be quiet, how to stay out of the way, and how to turn to the one thing that never let me down: my journal. Writing became my refuge. When the world felt too heavy, I could pour everything onto the page, and it felt like I could breathe again. By the time I hit my late teens, I was battling something I didn't yet have the words for: anxiety and depression. It came in waves, sometimes small, sometimes crashing so hard I thought I'd drown. Most people didn't know. I became good at pretending, at plastering on a smile and saying I was just tired. At night, though, the panic attacks came, the shaking hands, the tight chest, the tears I couldn't control. I hated feeling weak. I hated that I couldn't just will myself to be normal. But writing kept me afloat. My journals filled with messy handwriting, half-finished thoughts, and desperate prayers became the only place I felt safe. When I went to college, I carried my notebooks with me like lifelines. That's where I met Jason. He was the kind of guy who lit up a room without even trying. Charismatic, funny, always ready with a quick comeback that left people in stitches. He noticed me in a way no one else had, and in those early days, it felt like magic. When I was around him, the heaviness lifted. He made me laugh when I felt broken, teased me gently when I got too serious, and told me once, grinning ear to ear, "You're the funniest person I know. You should be on stage instead of me." For someone who had spent her whole life hiding, it felt like he saw something worth bringing into the light. We started dating, and I thought I'd finally found my safe harbor. With Jason, I let my guard down. I told him things I'd never told anyone. About the nights I couldn't stop crying. About the mornings I could barely drag myself out of bed. About the panic attacks that left me curled on the bathroom floor. He held me sometimes, brushing my hair back, whispering that he'd always be there. And I believed him. But there were red flags I ignored. Jason joked about everything. The weather, his professors, our relationship, even serious conversations. At first, it seemed harmless. That was just his way. I told myself. He made the world lighter, easier. But sometimes, his jokes cut too close. Once, after I'd had a particularly rough night, I asked him quietly, half joking but half terrified, "You'll never use me as material, right?" He laughed, kissed my forehead, and said, "Of course not. I'd never do that to you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just scribbling my pain into a journal. I was living, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could love all the messy, broken parts of me. I had no way of knowing then that the very secrets I gave him, the ones I trusted him with, would one day become the punchlines that shattered me. It happened months after Jason and I had broken up. A breakup he ended coldly over text. No explanation, just a simple asterisk, "This isn't working anymore." Asterisk I had tried to move on, pouring myself into work, into writing, into anything that kept me from thinking about him. One night, a mutual friend invited me to a local comedy show. I hesitated when I heard Jason would be performing, but I told myself I could handle it. I wasn't there for him. I was there to support my friend. Besides, enough time had passed, or so I thought. The theater was packed, the energy buzzing as Jason stepped onto the stage. He looked every bit the rising star, confident, charming, soaking in the applause. His set started off funny, stories about college professors, awkward dates, the kind of material that made everyone laugh and nod in recognition. For a while, I even found myself laughing, lulled into the rhythm of his performance. But then, without warning, his tone shifted. "So, I used to date this girl," he began, smirking as the crowd leaned in. My stomach dropped. He described her as a little dramatic, the type who cried over nothing and needed a paper bag to breathe into every time life got stressful. The audience chuckled, and then he said it. She'd have these panic attacks, full-on meltdowns, crying on the bathroom floor, begging me to just sit there. I'm like, what am I, a therapist or a boyfriend? The room erupted with laughter, but I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Word for word, he was recounting the private conversations I had trusted him with, the nights I'd sobbed in his arms, the mornings I'd confessed how broken I felt, now twisted into a comedy routine for strangers. It was like being stripped naked in front of a room full of people, every raw nerve exposed while they laughed at my pain. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out with shaking hands and saw texts from friends in the audience. Asterisk, is that about you? Asterisk, asterisk, oh my God, Emily, I think he's talking about you. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. Without waiting for the set to end, I shoved past the laughing crowd and stumbled out into the night, tears blurring the streetlights. At home, I collapsed onto the couch, still trembling. But the nightmare didn't end there. Clips of his performance had already started circulating online, going viral within hours. I sat there in the dark, replaying the video over and over, hearing him mock the most vulnerable parts of me while strangers in the comments typed laughing emojis and jokes of their own. It was as if my deepest pain had been auctioned off, and the whole world was bidding on it. I thought about calling him, about demanding an apology, but what good would that do? He'd already chosen his stage over me. He'd already decided my story wasn't mine anymore. Wiping my tears with trembling hands, I stared at the glow of the screen and whispered to myself, if he wants to use my story, he's going to regret it. That was the moment I stopped being his victim. That was the moment I decided to take my pain back and make sure he'd never forget what it cost him. The fallout was worse than I could have imagined. Within a week of Jason's set going viral, I couldn't walk into work without feeling eyes on me. Co-workers who used to chat with me at the coffee machine now whispered behind their hands, their laughter cutting off when I walked by. I'd catch phrases, asterisk that's her asterisk, or asterisk the panic attack girl asterisk, and it made my skin crawl. My family wasn't spared either. My younger cousin texted me a link with a shocked asterisk, is this about you? Asterisk, and my mom, who had always been so protective of me, called in tears. Emily, I saw that video. How could he do that to you? She asked, her voice breaking. I didn't have an answer, but the worst part came from strangers. The comment sections were brutal. She must be insane. Who dates a train wreck like that? No wonder he dumped her. Every cruel word sank into me like poison, confirming the fears I had always carried about myself. I had spent years hiding my anxiety, terrified people would see me as weak or broken. And now my most private battles were public property, reduced to a punchline. Meanwhile, Jason was thriving. He'd taken the same set on tour, and every city seemed to eat it up. Comedy blogs praised his raw honesty and fearless storytelling, calling him a voice of his generation. Each headline felt like a slap. He was being rewarded for turning me into a caricature, for selling my suffering as entertainment. My anger simmered hotter with every article, every glowing review. At night, I'd lie awake replaying his words in my head, the sound of the audience's laughter echoing like a cruel chorus. I needed an outlet, so I went back to the one place I'd always felt safe, my journal. Only this time, I didn't just scribble feelings I'd never show anyone. I started writing essays, honest, raw pieces about what it felt like to have your pain stolen, to watch the world laugh at your vulnerability. At first, I kept them private, but when I showed one to a close friend who worked in publishing, she looked at me with wide eyes. Emily, this is powerful, she said. You should pitch this. People need to hear your side. The idea terrified me. What if nobody cared? What if people thought I was just bitter, trying to tear down a successful man because he'd broken my heart? The doubt ate at me. And then, as if on cue, Jason's agent caught wind that I was writing and sent a thinly veiled warning. Any attempt to defame Jason could have serious legal consequences. My hands shook when I read that email. Who was I to fight someone with lawyers and a growing fan base? Every time I sat down to write, I relived the betrayal, the bathroom floor, the shaking hands, the smirk on Jason's face as he mocked me in front of hundreds of strangers. There were nights I slammed my notebook shut, certain I couldn't keep doing this to myself. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more the anger clawed its way back. Then came the breakthrough. One evening, after another sleepless night scrolling through Jason's latest sold-out tour photos, I opened my laptop and typed out a short essay. I titled it "The Joke Was Me." It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I hit publish on a whim, convinced no one would read it. By morning, thousands had. My inbox overflowed with messages from people I'd never met. I went through this too. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Your story made me feel less alone. For the first time since that night in the theater, I felt something. Other than humiliation, I felt heard. Within days, the essay went viral. Online forums debated it, mental health advocates shared it, and news outlets picked it up. And then, out of nowhere, I got an email from a Netflix producer. The subject line read, "Have you ever considered selling your story?" My breath caught as I read their message. Your essay struck a chord. We think there's a bigger story here. We'd love to talk. The offer filled me with both excitement and dread. Was this just petty revenge dressed up as empowerment? Was I lowering myself to Jason's level by turning my pain into a product? But then I thought about the truth. Jason was already making money off my trauma. He had stolen my story and twisted it for laughs. Why shouldn't I take it back and tell it the way it really happened? Why shouldn't I own the rights to my own life? As I closed my laptop that night, I whispered to myself, if he thinks he wrote my story, he's about to find out how wrong he was. Signing the deal with Netflix felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's life. 1 minute, I was a girl scribbling in a journal to keep herself from falling apart, and the next, I was sitting across from executives who wanted to turn my pain into a limited series. But this time, I wasn't being exploited. I was in control. I made it clear from the beginning. The show wasn't going to be some dramatized soap opera. It was going to be raw, real, and honest. I worked closely with the writers, combing through scripts, insisting on details that captured not just the panic attacks, but the loneliness, the shame, the quiet strength it took to keep going. For once, my voice wasn't being stolen. It was being amplified. When Netflix announced the series, the internet lit up overnight. Headlines screamed, "Comedians X sells story rights to Netflix." Articles dissected every angle. Some called me brave. Others accused me of clout chasing. Jason, of course, tried to play it off. On Twitter, he posted, "excited to see the fictional version of my love life. Remember, folks, comedy is comedy." But I could tell he was rattled. His smugness had cracks now, the kind you only noticed if you'd spent years watching him perform, and then the show premiered. I didn't know what to expect. I sat in my apartment with my mom and Marcus, clutching a pillow like a life raft as the first episode played. Watching an actress reenact my breakdowns was brutal, like holding a mirror up to my worst moments. But the storytelling was honest. It didn't make me a victim. It made me human. And when the credits rolled, I checked my phone and saw the reviews flooding in. Brave, powerful, heartbreaking. Finally, a story that shows what anxiety really looks like. Audiences weren't laughing anymore. They were listening. Within weeks, the impact was undeniable. Jason's ticket sales started to plummet. Comedy blogs that had once praised his raw honesty now questioned whether he'd built his career on cruelty. Fans tweeted that they couldn't support a man who profited off mocking mental health struggles. Venues quietly cancelled his bookings, not wanting the bad press. And for the first time, Jason wasn't in control of the narrative. I was. The call came late one night. My phone buzzed, and his name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. His voice, once so smooth and confident, was laced with panic. "You ruined me, Emily," he spat. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My career is tanking because of you." I took a breath, steadying myself. My heart raced, but my voice came out calm, even. "No, Jason, I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourself." I just told the truth. There was silence on the other end. The kind of silence that tells you've hit a nerve. He muttered something I couldn't quite catch, then hung up. I sat there in the quiet, staring at my phone, a strange mix of relief and finality washing over me. For the first time since that night in the theater, I felt like I had my life back. Jason could no longer twist my story into a joke. It was mine again, and now the whole world knew it. When the whirlwind finally slowed, I found myself sitting in the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The revenge, I realized, had never really been about destroying Jason. Yes, watching his ticket sales plummet and seeing the smugness wiped off his face had been satisfying. But that wasn't the real victory. The real revenge was reclaiming my voice. For so long, I'd felt like my pain was something to be hidden, something shameful. Jason tried to weaponize it, turning my lowest moments into a joke. But instead, I turned them into a story that gave me strength. What once humiliated me became the very thing that empowered me. Life looks different now. The Netflix deal not only gave me financial stability I'd never dreamed of, but it also opened doors I hadn't even known were possible. I started speaking at events about mental health and storytelling, standing on stages where people listened, really listened. As I shared what it meant to take back control of your own narrative, I met women from all walks of life who told me their stories, some whispering through tears, some speaking with the fire of determination. And I realized my platform wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. I started a small initiative to help other women protect their narratives, offering workshops on writing, publishing, and even basic legal rights when it came to sharing their stories. The messages I received weren't just thank yous. They were proof that none of us were truly alone. That realization was worth more than any headline or review. Sometimes I still think about that night in the theater, sitting frozen in my seat, hearing strangers laugh at the most painful parts of my life. But now, the memory doesn't sting the same way. Instead of shame, I feel pride. Pride that I didn't let that moment define me. Pride that I turned the very thing meant to break me into something unshakable. Jason wanted my pain to be his punchline, but I made sure it became my platform. The night the final episode of my Netflix series premiered, I sat curled up on the couch with my mom and Marcus on either side of me. Bowls of popcorn sat half-eaten on the coffee table, and the glow from the TV filled the room with a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in years. As the credits rolled, silence settled over us. Not the heavy, suffocating silence I used to know, but a quiet filled with peace. My mom squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride, and Marcus leaned his head back, grinning like he'd known all along that I could do this. I thought back to that night in the comedy club, when I sat frozen in the dark as Jason turned my panic attacks into a punchline. I remembered the sound of strangers laughing at my pain, the humiliation that had made me want to disappear. But sitting there now, I realized how far I'd come. My story wasn't his to tell anymore. It was mine, and I had told it on my own terms. I leaned back against the couch, letting out a long breath, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. He used my struggles to get laughs. I used them to get heard. And trust me, the world laughs with me now, not at me.